Hello, Alex. Okay, this is a quick review or overview guide of Educare Finance Module and the usages. The usage is actually versatile, but in terms of setup, we would have to look at few places of interest. The first one being the chart of account, and then the other ones being the account list and the account setup. After which every other thing is all about management. Now let's look at the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts, like every other chart of account, is the full account schema of any establishment. This is where you decide what's your asset, what's your liability, what's your expenditure, what's your income, and where does your equity lie. And in these 5 different account heads, you can actually go ahead and subgroup them into account types. So in the account types, for instance, you can find things like cash and cash equivalent. That's a subheading, which is actually an asset. You can find things like cost of goods sold and sales revenue and other expenditure. All these are different account groups or types that you would find in the system, or you can create within the system and link them to the individual account heads where they belong. Now, usually amongst these 5 account heads, that is the asset, liability, income, expenditure, and equity, right? Some are debit inclined, while the other ones are credit inclined. And what we mean by being debit inclined or credit inclined is which ones are positive values on debit, which one gets increased by debit transaction, which one gets decreased by debit transaction. Same thing on the credit part. All right. So, and on that note, assets assets are debit accounts, meaning they get increased when a debit transaction occurs in them. Equity is a credit account, which means they get increased when a credit occurs in them. Expenditure is a debit account, which means they increase when a debit occurs in them. Revenue is a credit account, which means they get increased when credit occurs in them. Liability is also a credit account, which means they increase when a credit occurs in them. And for each one of these, if it's a credit account, which means it increases when credit occurs in it, then a debit in the same account will decrease the current balance on that account. And we will see all of that when we go to reports, or even when we look at our account ledger. That is when we look at our general ledger. All right. So, and to be sure you have the general ledger active, all you need to do is just go to Permissions Manager, locate Finance Module, and make sure that your general ledger is active in Finance Module. Right there, right here on the list, just locate General Ledger and activate it. That's all for the particular account head that you want to be able to, or the person that you want to have access to the control. All right, so I'll simply refresh this login, and of course I'll find the account ledger there. For the benefit of this expose, we are assuming that this is the very first entrance, the very first time that this system is being used. So this is we assuming that this is the beginning of this account ledger. So there is nothing here, not even by filter, nothing. You can't find any data here, and the charts of accounts are already charted. Now, to be able to handle everything that has to do with the chart of accounts, let's have a quick review of what it takes to create it in the first place. Remember what I said a moment ago, the account types are subgrouping of the main 5 account heads in a general basic accounting. So you can create as many as you want and group them into your schema, the way you want to have yours. For instance, here we have cash and cash equivalent, and that is meant to hold things like bank, cash, inventory, and all our receivables. Now, these 4 accounts that you see here are all what we call statutory accounts, which means the system always expects there to be a chart of account group that belongs to, that holds all the bank accounts, that holds cash or petty cash, that holds inventory, and the one that holds accounts receivable. Basically, you will find the same, or well, something similar when you go to something like accounts payable. So accounts payable, of course, refer to accounts that's liability, all the liability account heads that you have within the system, or account groups that you have. Things like unearned revenue. Unearned revenue will be the account group inside account head payable that holds things like wallet, cooperative constraints, and stuff like that. Money that you have in your control, but it does not belong to you, an unearned revenue. Okay, so which means you are owing for those monies that you are currently holding in those payables. All right, so we also have things like cooperative holdings for people who have cooperative installed in their system, and cooperative first and others. These are all within the auspice of the account types. Now, when you go over to the chart of accounts part, you are now listing the accounts that belong to these groups that we just mentioned. And things like accounts receivable, again, is a statutory account, so you can't delete it. And every other one here, maybe you'll be able to play with them, change one or two of them, and so on and so forth. But these ones that you don't find delete button on them, they are statutory accounts. Things like cash, sales, accounts receivable, inventory, cost of sales, income tax, owner's investment, for instance, retained earnings, petty cash, and others. So you find these ones as indelible, right? And you can see them here, all of them. But for the others, you can delete them, you can create new ones for yourself as much as you want. Now, looking at how to create one is a very simple schema. Just name the account. For instance, I just want to create maybe entertainment expense, things that has to do with entertaining people when they come to the system, when they come to our office or something. Now I have groups that they can belong to, including expense, right? And then here I give it a code. Now these codes, remember that when you are creating a group, you create a code range. Now here you use the code range. Now when you start typing any number at all, the system will let you know the minimum range. And when you exceed that minimum range, or if the minimum range is already in use, the system will also let you know. So here, this is the minimum range. Five, 3, 0. Okay, 0. Good. That's the first account code that I want to give to this account head, that is the entertainment expense. And then I just click on save. That means that as long as this system is concerned, I can link a direct post or a requisition or a budget item to that particular chart of account. I can also make a post to it directly from with a ledger, direct post to a ledger. That's a ledger posting directly to the entertainment expense. Okay, but first, what matters most is that you can see the account head is expenditure. even though the account type, that is the group it belongs to, is expense. All right, the name is entertainment expense. So now under the account types, again, we can have subgroups. For instance, I showed you a moment ago that cash and cash equivalent comprises of 4 subtypes: bank, cash, inventory, account receivable. You can add more to it, and the same thing goes with everything here. So if I'm looking at all the expense accounts, for instance, I can see expense, cost of goods, taxation, right? They are just the 3 expenditure account heads here. But if you look at cost of goods sold, you see that it has cost of sales as one of the subgroups, right? And if you look at taxation, you see that it has income tax as one of the subgroups. So that's basically how it works. And how do you group them? Very simple. I'm looking at retained. Okay, I'm looking at asset. Asset is right there, and I want it to hold liquid or long-term assets and short-term assets as groups, right? Well, all I have to do is here I create long-term assets, right? Then of course, if we check here now, you will see that we have that. Okay, let's even add the 2 of them at once. So we have the short-term assets also created. So if I'm looking at everything assets here, then I'll have long-term and short-term assets as part of them. All I need to do now is to group them into, first of all, the account head is asset, and then the parent group is assets. With that, of course, I've always known that, or well, I know that my assets starts from 15000 to 159999, something like that. And then maybe for the short-term assets, right, same thing, it belongs to asset account head, and now it also belongs to parent assets as parent account, as account type. Again, maybe because I already expect it to use the same schema with the previous one, then it's easy for me to give all of them the same account code. However, what matters at this point now is that, as you can see here, the assets have sub-accounts 2 now. One is long-term and the other one is short-term. If you want to remove any asset from being part of a group, all you need to do is click on the yellow button here to detach it. When you do that, then the system will again release it back into the list, as you can see here. Okay, so again, to attach, just do that and save. Okay, that's about account types and chart of accounts. The next part that is very important is the account list. The account list is actually bank list. Okay, so here the reason why we initially made use of it as account list is that previously chart of accounts was not a separate entity in the system. They were all encompassing within the managing of account numbers. But now that it's been separated, the account list is now only holding on to account numbers. Now, when you look at this list, all you will see here now are bank accounts, right? GT Bank, Wema Bank, another GT Bank, and you can see the individual accounts that they belong to. If you want to add a new account to this, all you need to do is click here, choose the bank, for instance, Zenith, and then enter the Nuban 10147496668, and the system will find the account number by itself. That's the account name rather, on its own. If that does not go through, kindly repeat. It might just be network. But when it is found, you will see the account number here, the account name here. Now, your own course is to enter the bank alias, bank name alias. Bank name alias helps you to remember what one account is for. For instance, I can simply say this is Zenith fees. You understand? And that's all I need to do. The moment I click on add now, then the system will add it to this place, Zenith fees as my alias, and at the same time add it to chart of account for me. Right? Add it to chart of account for me. So based on these schematics now, if I go to banks or list of banks inside chart of account, I should see Zenith 101474. What that means in effect is that when you add a bank item here, the system can automatically inject the bank as one of the chart of accounts under bank. That's bank group. Like we just saw now, it's an asset and the account type is bank, which is under the cash and cash equivalents group. So this account is already active here, and the system starts monitoring when cash comes in or leaves the chart. So that is the relationship between the account list and the chart of account. Now, the next place that is important in terms of setup is the account heads under the account setup. The account setup, the account heads actually holds the individual schematics of payment reception or payment receiving, right? These are payment receivable heads. You understand? Mostly anyways, payment receivable heads or expense heads within the system, because within our system you can receive school fees, you can receive invoices for store items, you can issue out invoices for services, you can issue out invoices for admission form and other things. You can use our system to pay salary, and as a result, an expense head is also available. Our system also encompasses cooperative and wallet handling. So these are the individual handling receivables and expense heads for the system. And so creating a new one, of course, is always as simple as just a single click, and then you choose the account name you want to give it. For instance, if it's a school fee, you should have a school fee here, you should have a manager, and the moment you are done with that part, you should select the chart that this particular fee records in. Remember, the chart of account will always be available here. All your charts are always available here. So it's a matter of which one do you want to use to record school fees. Now, because we know we're about to create school fees, we can just head here back right away and create a revenue kind of. So we can simply call it fees revenue, right? In which case it must be a revenue, right? And once we select that, then of course we give it a code. If code starts from 41000, so there we go, school fees. So it is now this fees that we will attach our account setup for fees onto. So if I say I want to create a school fee account head now with admin as the access personnel, then from here I will have to select fees revenue as this account chart. Now this is not often the case for everything. In other cases, for instance, when you are doing a direct ledger posting, you will have to select your debit account and select your credit account. But here we are creating some of the exigencies that the system automatically imply onto, because school fees, when you are generating a school fees invoice, you just generate it and you post it, right? The system will simply record some of them, especially if you published it, the system will record it in receivables automatically, right? And when they are being paid, the system will expect them to reflect the credit of the payment should reflect on any account that you selected right here. That is the essence of having it already pre-selected. Then the currency, of course, and everything else is normal. Just select whether you want it to have an online payment or not, and then when it has an online payment, where do you want it to settle? So if you want it to settle in Zenith Bank, for instance, you select which of the Zenith banks and then you click on add. Automatically a school fees account head will be generated for you right here, or created for you as the case may be. Now if you look at every one of these, you can see their settlement banks, and if you look at their charts, that should also guide you. Make sure that every one of these accounts records in the right chart. Anyone that is not in the right chart, edit it immediately. For instance, the wallet is recording in accounts receivable. That's wrong. Wallet should have its own chart of account. So what do? Go to chart of account. If you don't have wallet, then create wallet. So here again, we add wallet account, and of course this time around we'll select on unearned revenue as the group, because this is one of those accounts that we don't yes, okay. So this is one of the accounts that we owe when people pay into, so it's unearned until debited. Okay, so with that having been created, then all you need to do now is back to this, edit the wallet and select the wallet account, save. That's all. So with that, you are sure that anytime you look at, so there are 3 places to look at whenever you are here. While you are looking at your account heads, check their type, make sure that they are the right types for the item that you are interested in. Check the chart of account, be sure that salary is properly charted, that portal subscription, for instance, is properly charted. Products, good. Cooperatives, good. Wallet, if it's in receivable, that means it's not yet charted. Chart it. School fees, chart it. That's the second one. The third one is to look at the settlement banks. The idea here is that for any of them that is a receivable account, if a payment is made online using Switch app for it, where that payment will be settled is dependent on your settlement bank right here. So make sure that you select the right settlement bank for each one of the account heads. Okay, so that's basically all about the setup. Every other thing about the setup is probably dependent on the budget or requisition of interest or direct posts that you are making, or a direct transfer or petty cash handling schema that you already have, and so on and so forth. So that's what that part usually entails. Now, in terms of usage, our system expands into different spheres. Like I already told you, manage accounts is used for managing school fees, invoicing, and so on and so forth. So you can actually look at it from here. You can see the school fees if you have access to it, and every other thing is implied. But let's look at what our current ledger looks like. Right now, this is our general ledger. There is nothing in it, right? Now, if I go over to requisitions, for instance, and decide to make a single request for fuel, like I usually do, and the price is 30,000 naira, and I want to choose where it goes. Maybe I choose light and power and add requisition. Do not add any item, add to list, yes. Now, I know the account I want to pay to is Alex, for instance. Just click on submit requisition. That's fine. Nothing wrong, nothing amiss. The moment this requisition is approved, first of all, look at the price, 30,000 naira. When I'm approving this requisition, and the moment I approve it, no problems, but the moment I start authorization and choose where I want the authorization to come from, for instance, right now, I think I should have received my authorization key. Let me see. Authorization code ought to have hit my inbox by now. Right there, new authorization code for 19th. Good. So if I get this and I take it over to this space, and I want to pay from a bank, this bank ought to already have that balance, right? Before I go ahead to maybe make a deposit, make a withdrawal, let's look at that account list one more time. If you are paying attention to this, you see that each one of them can have an opening balance. So if I am setting an opening balance for Zenith Bank, for instance, I can set it to have a 1 million naira initial balance, which I don't want to maintain the current one. I want it to be the very first balance on this scheme, right? The moment I do this, the system shows you the current balance on that Zenith Bank account. And if you check the general ledger, it has already reflected right there. So this is it. So you see it first of all coming from debiting 1 million naira to Zenith Bank, and then crediting owner's investment. This is the initial capital that came into the system. Now, if the first thing I did afterwards is to authorize this requisition, then let's see what happens to that money. So here, authorize, and of course choose bank, select Zenith fees. Of course, it will show me the 1 million. And if I say I'm paying manually and I'm authorizing this, two things I want us to see here now. Assume that I'm paying only 20,000 naira out of this 10,000 right now. The system will authorize, the authorization will go through, right? But it will show me that I am currently in debt, or I have a balance of 10,000 naira to pay for this particular requisition that I have already approved. How does the general ledger handle it? If we go to general ledger now, we will see that fuel was posted to the expenditure 30,000 naira, but when it was time to be credited, Zenith Bank received a credit of 20,000, while expense payable received the balance of 10,000 naira, which means we have a liability of 10,000 naira to clear, right? Now, if we maybe go to our reports, if we pull up our reports and check the general account heads, of course, you will see everything reflecting as it should. First, the income, no income, expenditure, you can see the expenditure debit, 30,000 naira. You can see the assets of 1 million naira with a credit of 20,000 naira. And you can see the liability of 10,000 naira, which is the payable that is currently hanging on one of the requisitions. If you go to equity, of course, you can see the credit of 1 million naira, which is the paid-in capital by the owner's investment, right? Of course, this goes on and on. You can see the trial balance, for instance, showing you exactly the same amount that you have on the positive and on the debit and the credit side. All right, so you have a total of 1,010,000, and of course the system still shows you everything as it should. The system is currently having a liability of 10,000 naira, which is something you're expecting that you should pay. No income anywhere, but you have that balance in liability. If you want it cleared, again, this is your requisitions. For every requisition that you make, the system shows you how much you've paid out and what's the balance. And if you click on it to open it up, you can see the payout history, where you can click on new payout and choose where you want to pay out from. Again, let's use the Zenith Bank and clear it out this time around. So here, confirm. So we've completed this payment. Now the question becomes, where will the 10,000 naira go to? Very simple. It's expected in your general ledger that the 10,000 naira unpayable should be cancelled, right? And if that's the case, then let's see where it went. There you have it. This is the expense payable that we made at 1636, and now at 1638 we have posted a debit to it, which means the money that we are owing, we have paid. Meanwhile, there is a credit of 10,000 naira on Zenith Bank. And if we go to reports, we get exactly a clear first of all, the trial balance for starters will return to 1 million, 1 million, right? No more debts. That's one. And if we check our liability, it will be 0, no more liabilities. And if we check every other report we have here, for instance, the balance sheet. Balance sheet is usually as simple as that. Just what's your income, what's your expenditure, and system shows you that. And if we check the general account report, where we can get these individual accounts, like see them individually, you can easily see expense payable by filtering it down here. Basically, what we have here is a customized or centralized focus on individual accounts. But if you go to ledger, you find, I mean, this general ledger is basically the same thing as what you can find in the reports. But here gives you all the list, and you can export if you want. You can filter it down, can choose which section you are interested in, and again, here you have the charts, even having them grouped according to revenue, expenditure, I think the rest of them, equity, assets, liabilities, and all that. So you find them all here. You can even go directly to your bank, the particular bank of interest, and update report, and the system will simply, okay, so the system as of this moment should just give you the list based on the selected chart. All right, so that's one part. I'm running out of time at this point, especially given my time constraints in terms of battery, but I think the rest you should be able to carry on from here. As a new introduction, I want to also show you how to handle direct posting that has to do with the ledger directly. For instance, someone paid into the account, and it's not like you gave the person an invoice before now. Let's say it's a service that you rendered. It's a very simple thing for you to make a posting to that effect. But for you to have access to make a posting in the first place, it is part of what you find in account setup. So for this button to show up here, that means I have the right to make posting. Now, this ledger posting is a new inclusion. This is used for our two-way posting, right? So if, like I was explaining to you now, if we have received 200,000 naira from a school for a service which we didn't give out an invoice ab initio, this is where we enter it. For instance, BTS invoice bracket dash manual. So this is a manual invoice of 200,000 naira. How do we receive it? Of course, we can easily click here to get a reference or enter the reference as we want. Click here to key in the exact date, and then which bank are you going to debit for this? This is where you select that. Who is receiving this money? Maybe GT Bank. And who is being credited? Which account will be credited for this? Maybe Educare subscription, right? So you select that. Now, who is the customer? The customer, where you select supplier or customer, depends on who you are going to record this particular transaction under. This is Educare subscription, for instance. Which customer is paying for it? You understand? So here you select which of the customers you are currently in, attaching this payment to, and how much are you interested in charging this person or keying in for this customer. Now, anytime any amount you put in here, the system has a way of picking it up right here if you click on this button to imply all the balance on this particular schema, and then when you click on add, to close it if it is everything. Well, let's assume that in terms of debiting, that though one credit was received, that you debited two different accounts for it. Again, let's say for instance that you sent 150,000 to GT Bank, right? The system will still come up here now expecting one more or at least extra balance until the 200,000 is accounted for. That is a balanced account. So for that case, let's say this second debit is going to Zenith, and if I click this, it will get the final balance, and of course I can push it in. So you see now that I have 2 debits for 1 credit. It's valid. You can have it vice versa also. But what I'm pointing out to you now is that when you do this kind of submission, you don't find it on the direct posting here. You find it on the general ledger or the reports. This is it. So here you can find for BTS invoice manual 434, it has 150 credit, 150 debit to GT Bank, 50,000 to Zenith Bank, but 200,000 naira to Educare subscription. That is how to make a direct post here. Okay, so basically that's one of the few infusions that we have within the system. Let me see if there is any other thing that is worth mentioning here. When you are interested in a particular customer, you want to put the customer ledger, this is where you go for it. So here you can see British Spring College as one of the customers, right? You can always go all the way back and select a particular date of interest and pull up anybody's credit or debit if you're interested. But any of these customers, the reason why you will see their data actually is based on whether they are currently owing you or you are owing them, right? So there is only one leg of credit here, which is 200,000 naira, and that is the only thing that you will find on this system. Of course, it was not issued, it was a direct payment, right? No invoice was raised for it, so we won't find any issued schema around it. But the record is right here that you made a credit of 200,000 naira on their head. Okay, of course, it's always exportable and all that. The cash flow on the other side, on the other hand, is a depiction of your current cash inflow or outflow, right? So far, so good. We've got a total of 1,170,000 within the system, and that came from, first of all, 1 million naira bonus investment and 200,000 naira Educare subscription. Of course, we also have the operating activities that took 30,000 out of it, and that is it. So if we want to see the cash book table, it's just right there. So you can see where the money came in from and where the money was let go. All right. So basically, that's the much I can go in depth in terms of reports. I hope to be able to make another concise video over this. Thank you.